All right. So we are live. We're back in this piece. Sorry, everyone. So sorry for the technical difficulties. Like I said, this was my first time going live, and I wanted to make sure everything worked out properly, but unfortunately, it didn't work out the way I wanted to. But we got it all ironed out and fixed. So we're back in here live. Here with my good man, No Excuse. I gotta tell you, of course, you guys remember me actually doing a recording with him down in Medellin. And we had a good time recording, making that video, and we wanted to make several more videos because not only have we done videos with each other, but we also met several times. We've actually had a good time, in Cartagena and I think also in Medellin. I don't remember we met anywhere else. Correct me if I'm wrong, but nonetheless, he's like another brother to me. No excuse. He's been to 3 different continents. He visited 13 different cities in Colombia. He has a lot underneath his belt. You also see him on the BMT channel, which is Black Man Travels. It's also been on the Charles Tyler podcast show, and as well as the Road to Tape. So my good friend, my good man here, No Excuse. Welcome to the show. Definitely appreciate you being here.
Oh man, appreciate it, man. I'm glad to be back, man. Excited to be back, man. Yes, sir.
Good. So, of course, the topic here is about dating in Colombia. We wanted to get more. We wanted to go in deeper detail about dating in Colombia this time around. We wanted to make sure that we give you guys the best information than what we did the first time, because of the fact that so much was going on. We were in Medellin. I was in one of our Airbnbs, and there was just so much stuff going on. Dogs barking, plane flying by. Our recording got interrupted like 15 times. So, so we wanted to make this, better quality while I'm in studio, while he's in a quiet place, and give you guys more details. So, and the thing about it is, we wanted to go more in depth, especially on Barakia, and as well as Medellin. So if you don't mind me ask you, as far as your history, if you give us a breakdown of some of the things that you've accomplished as far as traveling, where have you been to? Give us another breakdown of that.
Okay, cool, man. I'll just run down the list of countries that I've been to. I've been to Belize. That was the first country I visited. Then Brazil, DR, Colombia. Then I finally made it to Asia with Japan, Philippines, and Thailand. And next month, I'll be going to South Africa and Ethiopia, and I'll be vlogging my days in Africa on my YouTube channel as well, which is No Excuse ENT World.
Nice. I'm gonna have to bring you back on to talk about Japan and the Philippines, even Thailand, for some of those Asian countries. That's something to talk about. Even from your expression, it says a lot.
My favorite country is Thailand. I'll say that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I wanted to go to Thailand, last 2020, but due to COVID, that like messed things up for me. So I was unable to make that trip out to Thailand. I wanted to go this year, but there's just so many restrictions going on with Thailand right now. It is crazy. I think the latest news that was released is that at the end of October, they're looking to allow tourists back into Thailand with no problems, with no more quarantines and things like that. And I think they brought a 3-step plan. So I was actually looking at it earlier today, and they were saying that I think starting either next month or something like that. But I don't know if you've seen that information.
Yeah, I've seen that. They said October 1st is when they want to normalize it. My flight is booked for October 29th. So hopefully
by that time you won't have no problems.
Hopefully I'm good, man. I can't keep pushing it back, man. So
I know what you mean. So I'm gonna try to do the same thing myself. I'm gonna try to get something going, but I'm gonna wait. I'm not gonna run back out there like in October, since this will be my first time. I want to make sure everything is ironed out before I take that trip, to Thailand. But without any further ado, let's get into this. Let's talk a little bit about Barakia. I've visited Barakia before. Barakia is a really nice place. If any of you guys ever been there, it kind of reminds me of Havana in Cuba. And I got that same look to it, as far as the people, the look, and so forth. But I wanted to get your personal opinion of being in Barakia and of that whole area. So the first question I actually have is, what made you want to visit Barakia?
I think the first time I visited Baranquilla, it was out of curiosity, because the cities that I wanted to visit in Colombia, you know, I started wanting to visit coastal cities, and Barranquilla is on the coast. So that was like the closest city to Cartagena, and then just an easy bus ride from Cartagena to Barranquilla. Um, so it was just curiosity was the reason why I wanted to check it out, because I wanted to see if the people of African descent. I wanted to know where on the coast is the majority of people of African descent.
Okay, so basically, the main reason for you wanting to go to the coast was because of the African diaspora of being out there in Colombia. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, because most slaves in most countries that had slaves, most of the black people are on the coast. So so depending on what slave port they came through, that's where you're gonna see the most people of African descent.
Nice, nice. I actually remember seeing something on Voss regarding that there is a actual, I guess, a city near Cartagena, near Barakia, somewhere in that area, which was like the first founded slave city. And they actually still have like the African, language and music. That's where Cumbia was actually most of the I guess the parts of Cumbia is from, or so, from that little town area. I'm not sure if you know anything about that or
You
so.
referring to Palenque? Palenque?
Uh, no, no, no. It was something I just saw on it was on Voss. They're just saying that city. I can't remember the name of it. I don't think it's that same city that you said, but hopefully, if I could dig it up, I'll bring it up to everybody so they could see what's going on with that. But it's some nice historical facts that they brought, because they're just talking about the music, and for me, I'm a big music guy, so I love music. I love, especially in Colombia, I love history. That's one of the biggest reasons why I travel, is because of history. I like to see what's going on with that country, where they came from, how did they get it established, and all that good stuff. That's just me all together. But yeah, I'm sorry not to derail this. Let's get back to Barakia. So, um, as far as Barakia, as far as your own personal perception of a Barakia with dating, how would you take as far as dating in Barakia? How is it compared for you?
Um, I would say I've dated one girl that was from Barranquilla, um, and so the first part is how do you date, or how do you get to date to how do you get to that point of dating? And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it was online searching with the Cupid sites. They have Colombian
Mm-hmm.
Cupid and Latin American Cupid. And so I met a young lady from Baranquilla from the website, and I want base I want project her personality on the whole city. But what I've noticed just from her circle of friends and people she's been around, a lot of people, women in particular, are kind of up on game and up on things with American culture. So
Mm-hmm.
Barranquilla is, I would say, in Colombia, is probably one of the more educated cities. Um, people learn English, in grade school through high school. So there's a lot of people that speak fluent English, real good English in Barranquilla.
Nice.
And then, there's a lot more job opportunities in Baranquilla as well. So women that she's introduced me to either had American or foreign husbands. Um, they kind of have set expectations on, if you date a foreigner, this is what you're gonna get from dating a foreigner. So they're kind of, so they kind of have, in Baranquilla, the women kind of have, predetermined expectations from foreigners. You know, the girl I was dating, she was probably a little disappointed because she probably thought I was going to be sending money all the time and stuff like that. You know,
You know how that goes.
you know, and you know, they play their, you know, they for the most part they play their role if they feel like you meet their expectations. But Baranquilla, out of all the cities, I feel like, you know, they're programmed to expect certain things from Americans because they see, because a lot of um, marriages and relationships, I would say the most in Colombia are in Barranquilla, international
Okay.
relationships.
And one thing I would say that they talk to a lot of the women, and they love to talk. If one person is married or dating a American guy, they're gonna let everybody know. And I noticed that in Colombia, like they have this I guess this perception of, you know, if you're dating a gringo guy or whatever, that, you know, your life is supposed to be grand, it's supposed to be nice, you know, you should never have any worries, and that Americans have tons of money. Is like, yeah, it's not like that, you know. I mean, we got money, but we're not looking to do all of that. What they're expecting us to do is like, uh,
I don't
you
know
know,
if you remember, but you ever seen like on WhatsApp like it was like a comedy clip. It was like these four Colombian women, and one of them had a gringo boyfriend. They was all talking in Spanish, but they didn't know he understood
oh
Spanish. And
yeah,
then when he understood, and he was like, you know, because she was like, because they was like, how was the sex in the Spanish? They was like, it's okay, but he takes care of me. But then he
mhm.
knew what they were saying, and then once he knew what they were saying, they looked embarrassed. But I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember that or not.
Yeah, I remember that. And then at the same time, she was still messing with the ex or some other guy. So
That was
she told
Baranquilla.
him,
Those women were Baranquilla.
oh man, that's funny, you know. But hey, James, he got a question here. He says here, what's cheaper, Colombia or Thailand?
I would say, and if you're looking at an overall trip, I mean, it could even out. You're gonna pay a more expensive flight to go to Thailand, of course, but accommodations, food, and even you know, extracurricular activities is way cheaper than Colombia. But Colombia, the flight is a third or half the cost. So you know what I mean. So it's just a difference between maybe 500 to $1,000 if you want to compare, you know, the overall trip expense
And I'm sure different seasons.
or tricking expense.
Yeah, I'm sure different season too. You know, of course, for flights, it's cheaper during certain seasons, and of course, same thing with Colombia. What I've noticed, you know, going to Colombia in December is extremely expensive. This past in 2020, when I went out there, I was paying about $800 per flight, and I'm just like,
Mm,
oh god,
really?
yeah. Well, of course, you know, I don't fly Spirit. That's the thing, you know. I don't, you know, I hate Spirit. You know, those that know me, you know, I've had some bad experience. I know people that have some bad experience with Spirit, and I don't want to run into any situation, especially since I have to have a layover from Colombia to get to Chicago. So it's either going to be in Florida or Fort Lauderdale, and I've had some bad experience, and I just don't want to have a situation that they cancel my flight while I'm Fort Lauderdale, and I have to
Spirit
pay another
is
$1,000.
Spirit is good, man, for international travel. Domestic travel, not so much, but I don't know. I love Spirit, man.
Okay, you know me, I usually fly American or, you know, United, some of the bigger ones, you know, if I can, but I prefer American because it makes it easier for me to get down there from Chicago. You know, it's a direct flight. I mean, from Miami, if I could go from Chicago straight to Miami, that's 2.5 hours right there for me. Then another, you know, 2 hours to get to Medellin or whatever. So it just makes it easier. You know, United, you know, you're going to be going from ORD from Chicago straight to sometimes Texas, I believe, and then Texas to
Mm.
maybe Bogota, something like that. So that is you know, something that I try to avoid that time from traveling, you know. But here, let me have another question for you, you know. So what is unique about the women of Barakia compared to all the other women if you dealt with as far as Colombia? Because I know that I'm sure you dealt with a couple, you know, from Medellin and, you know, Cartagena, but what sets the women from Barakia apart from all the other women?
Oh man, I would say Baranquilla has a lot of, well, I would say Baranquilla has a lot of potential. I mean, the women there are they're working, they're working 9 to 5 women. Um, so I would say you're more likely to find a woman, with a job, and that's not independent. They like to go out. Baranquilla has a lot of nice like bars and restaurants. They have like a little area where people go on the weekends and things like that. They do have it's not as bad as Medellin, but they do have a flake culture, meaning that you could be stood up or something like that.
Have you dealt with that or so personally while you were in Barakia?
I mean, not far as dating, but I mean like giving chicks my number and they never called, you know, stuff like that. I've experienced. But for the most part, I would say the city itself. I mean, there's a lot of places where you could go to see women, and Barranquilla was the city where I broke my neck a lot of times. You know, and I was surprised because Medellin, was a city like that. But Barranquilla has a lot. I would say they have just as many beautiful women as Medellin. A lot of people kind of sleep on Barranquilla. As far as how they look, they're mostly of the whiter complexion, but they have a slight tan, so you could kind of tell they're from the coast. But they don't. They're not as dark as women from like Cartagena or anything like that.
Sophia Vergara, she's actually from there. She's on the Modern Family. She's originally from Barakia, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken,
really?
as what's the name? That singer. She actually got the song out with Black Eyed Peas. Shakira. So she's
Okay,
actually from
Shakira. Yeah,
Barakia.
I will
Yeah.
say that if guys are looking for the women to be there to be easy from dating perspective, I won't say I want to say that like you're gonna have to go on a few dates. What I mean, you're gonna have to put in some work. What I mean, not matrix work, but you're gonna have to put in a little work. What I mean, but if you're visiting and you're there for a week or 2 weeks, or if you've been talking to someone, from a dating site for a while, you should be able to you should be able to have a good experience when you're down there.
All right, nice. So, what is the typical, let's say, the body type of women from Barakia? Because we already talked on the skin complexion and everything, but are they like pretty thin or thick or how would you describe them?
I would say they're mostly on the thinner side. I mean, you won't see a lot of overweight women. I mean, you'll just see, slender, lean stomach. Um, I would say they're not as they're not as I would say curvaceous as like let's say women in like Medellin or Cali. But I mean they're beautiful in the face. There's a variety of different type of body types. And I don't know, man. I've seen some very curvaceous women. I've seen some very slim women. Typical long hair, shoulder length, mid back length. Um, it's it's not necessarily a distinct look, but like I said before, they have slight tan, so you could tell they're from the coast.
Oh yeah. What about the hair? Because yeah, I got a thing for Colombians with black hair. That's why I spent a lot of time in Medellin because I love that black hair with their skin tone. So, what
Not,
about the hair?
not black. I mean, most of the women is like a sand. It's more like a sandy brown, dark brown, but no, not like the jet black you would see in Medellin.
Okay. It's just like what we see from Sophia and Shakira, kind of that color, basically. So many words, when Shakira before she dyed her hair,
Yeah,
so many words when she first came out.
yeah.
So, from your perspective, since you had a chance to date one girl out there, so and you say you use dating apps, what are all the dating apps that you actually used to even find either pipeline these, whatever girl you wanted to do to find to try to get to know them?
I mean, I've tried Tinder. I mean, with Tinder in Baranquilla, I mean, you'll definitely get some matches. I would say the positive thing with Baranquilla is, like I said, a lot of the women are working women. You won't
Mm-hmm.
really find too many women that's have an agenda. Women in Barakia, they want to go out, they want to have a good time, they want to have drinks, go to eat, things like that. So that's what you would kind of expect from Tinder. But on, like I said, Latin American Cupid or ColombianCupid.com, that's where I met, my ex from Baranquilla there. So those are the main three.
So with them being hardworking, the type of women that are, the type that we kind of, a lot of the brothers would like in America, a woman that's actually working and doing their thing, does it take away from their level of femininity or so, or is it a good balance?
No, I mean, I think it's a good balance. The only drawback is, Colombians work when they do have a job. Usually they work 6 days a week on average. So, availability could be a challenge. So, like my ex, she didn't work. She did, odd jobs, different places here and there, but she didn't work. So whenever I came to see her, it wasn't a problem. She had a child, but she didn't have a job where she was kind of limited. So um, that's the only factor.
Yeah, I noticed that becomes to be a stress when they have a job working 6 days a week. I know a couple of other brothers that actually have women that does that, and it does create a stress because she's constantly working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and when you come down and to spend time with them, it becomes to be just rough. You got a lot of idle time. So I totally understand that. So I actually got a question here. Passport burner. He actually asked, what's wrong with Cartagena women? So
Nothing. Nothing. Nothing.
The only thing I would say is stay away from those from Venezuela that are actually out there. That's the biggest thing. That's in Cartagena. They're out there for a reason. It was like, you don't want to get caught up with that. They're out there because they have to be out there, not because they want to be out there. So some things could happen, and I for me it's hard to trust them. Matter of fact, I guess I'll tell you guys a story. Of me meeting a girl from Venezuela. I actually met her at a club, and I got her number and everything, and we were chopping it up, talking on WhatsApp for several weeks and months or so. And I was asking her about, hey, would you take me to Venezuela, whenever you got a chance? I like to, go back there because I've been in Venezuela once before, the whole meltdown of the economy and everything. This was like years ago when I was like really young. And I want to just get, some shots of the country because I know, Venezuela is very beautiful. They have a lot of stuff out there that is like breathtaking. And there was an island or place, a beach I wanted to go to. So she was telling me, yeah, she'll take me to the beach and everything, and take me around, everything is fine. So months later, I see one of her status on WhatsApp about a guy. She's saying how much she loves him and everything. So I'm like, oh, okay, nice. So I told her congratulations, on the person that, you're saying that you love and everything, you're in a relationship. She's like, no, that's my husband. I've been married to him for 5 years. I'm like, hold on. So she's like, yeah, he was actually in Cali. He was living in Cali while she was in Medellin. So, just to think of the situation, that if I would have went to Venezuela, you never know what could have happened. Some family members, someone could have stuck me up or something. I don't know. So for me, trusting, Venezuelans as much, especially outside of Venezuela, it's kind of hard, but I'm not saying all of them. There's some really good ones. I know one in Costa Rica I've been friends with for years, and she's down to earth. She's definitely a good person. Older lady, still looks good. Good friend of mine, but nonetheless, just got to be careful when dealing with Venezuelans in Colombia. That's one thing I definitely would say.
Oh man, I love them, man. I love them, man.
I know, don't we all? you know, but I try to be careful.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hey, what up, OW? Thanks for joining in. So here, so since let's dive a little bit more on the actual date with the one lady you were with in Barakia. So did you take her out anywhere, or what else did you do with her?
Well, most of our interactions, you know, I end up flying her out to a different city because, you know, I just felt like Baranquilla just wasn't touristy enough for me. So you know, so we hung out in Medellin or Cartagena. We went to San Andreas as well. Baranquilla, I've been to her family house. I stayed overnight in her house. Um, you know, and you know, meeting her family, like you meeting any woman in Colombia, and they, you know, they have their parents. When you come over, you're gonna have a meal. You know, they're gonna cook. You know, what I mean, they're very accommodating. You know, they make sure you get your every woman I dated. Like I got my food first. When I sat down, when I got finished eating, they removed my plate. You know, they just like, you know, chill, relax. And even when I stayed the night over there, like, you know, they was like, you know, her mom was like, you know, because her mom had a bigger room. She's like, y'all, y'all can stay in my room, you know. So,
Nice.
they're very, very accommodating. Baranquilla is just very hot. In certain times of the years, it's very hot. It's very, very hot. And for me, unbearable at some times. So that's why I wanted us to spend more time outside of Baranquilla.
Yeah, and the last time I went to Cartagena, and I was dying from the humidity. I think that's when we met up in I think it was August or so, or was it July? I don't recall.
It was October.
It was October. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was October.
So we
When
went
it
out there.
first opened back up, we was there like when it first opened back up.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We were out there. I think you was out there the first week, and I made it out like 2 weeks later.
I was ready.
So I had to wait because I had a lot of stuff going on with work, so I couldn't make it out there that first week. I was trying my hardest, but it just couldn't happen. But got out there, and oh my god!
No, you was there before me because I had an issue with the COVID test.
Oh yeah,
that was crazy.
Right. So basically, it had to be like the second week when we got out there. Like when they first opened up, it was like the second weekend. That is, went out there and yeah, man, it was hot, man. It was. I had the AC on blast in the room, and I was just like, oh man, I don't remember being this bad, stepping out.
Let me tell the fellas what I had to do when it first opened back up, man. Mm-hmm. I was thirsty to get back, you know what I mean? And especially because I haven't seen my girl in like 8 months. So I went to Cartagena, and Cartagena, I would say, is one of the more strict. I would say the strictest airport in Colombia coming in.
Oh yeah.
So I had my PCR test. I read all the details. They said 72 hours before departure from the U.S. So I get to Cartagena. They looking at the time. It was close, and I was like 2 hours from what they determined was too late. They was like, oh, it has to be 72 hours upon arrival. So instead of them just saying, okay, we'll let him go through, I was 2 hours off. They sent me back to the airline and flew my black ass back to the United States. So I had to buy a flight, get another test, and I ended up flying later that night to Medellin. It was a long, exhausting day, man. But I just wanted to share that with brothers, man.
Yeah, that's when they weren't playing. That was like you had to have everything on point. I remember that. Yeah, man, those were some long days prior, coming up till the time to fly out there because you want to make sure you had everything right. You had every piece of paper. You had to do the registration and the COVID and oh man, tell me about it. I remember catching you out there the next day or like 2 days later, probably met up. you had a big smile on your face. That's all that mattered once you got down there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you saved me, man. I'll just say that you saved me, man.
But because then you, I think, just like you said, you flew to Medellin with the Cartagena, and you said that basically Medellin they were more lax.
Medellin, Yeah, I got right through Medellin, man. I said I'm flying to Medellin for now on.
Said no more Cartagena, direct flight to Cartagena.
If I can stand it, yeah.
And of course now, they're, with the whole COVID test situation, is that they're allowing you to enter in, but that quarantine, what they're trying to make people do. We're still waiting for the Ministry of Health to come out with their protocol so that we could drop that PCR test. So that's definitely one of the things we're waiting on to hear, make our life a whole lot easier. But like I said before, I don't mind them having a PCR test, if they don't close the border or have any restrictions. So I'm fine for whatever it takes to allow us to keep going down in Colombia without any hiccups, any problems, or anything of that nature.
Mm.
So also we have James Smith. He actually has a question for us. It says, where in Colombia does your dollar stretch the furthest? I don't know if you want me to start. I'll let you go ahead.
Well, I would say Cartagena is the most expensive city overall, and I would say the expenses come from from hotel or Airbnb. I would say from my experience, my dollar stretched a lot. Pretty much outside of Cartagena, anytime I stayed in Colombia over 30 days, it's been Medellin. The dollar could stretch a lot in Bogota and Cali, Baranquilla. It depends because find a nice spot, you're gonna have to pay a little bit more money, and it's not you're gonna spend a little bit more money in Baranquilla. But for the most part, any side outside of Cartagena, I feel like your dollar cheap.
Yeah. For me, I could definitely say like any small town, your money would stretch the furthest, no matter what. I'll travel out to, like, let's say San Carlos. Here's the thing, here's the caveat to traveling to these small towns is the fact that you got to have mostly cash. They don't take credit cards. But if you go outside of these major cities, your money would stretch the furthest, from food to entertainment, if you can find entertainment. Depends on where you go to or the type of entertainment that you're looking for. But more so, it's the fact of everything is a whole lot cheaper. Food is cheaper. Your stay at a hotel is cheaper. But of course, you want to go out there with someone that these smaller cities, unless you're really good with Spanish, to move around, because riding the bus system in Colombia is kind of different compared to what we're used to in the United States. They'll just drop off or stop somewhere and be like, hey, we're here, and jump off. If not, you might miss the bus of jumping off. But traveling around Colombia is a bit, a little different. So, but you know what? Let's change the subject. Let's get on Medellin. Since both of us spent a lot of time in Medellin, I'm sure a lot of the people here, they like going and traveling to Medellin. One of my favorite cities to go to visit. And of course, I got my own wife there and everything. And for me, that's home to me, being there and just to lay my head and enjoy myself. So what's your take as far as the women? Let's compare and contrast the difference between Barakia and Medellin, the women. So what's your perception of the differences?
I would say in Baranquilla, you is very good for dating. In Medellin, not so much. Obviously, I would say that women can go neck to neck as far as beauty. You know what I mean? It just depends on what your style is. So in the looks department, I would say they definitely can compete with each other. But dating, I'll give Baranquilla the edge. And
Really?
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Because one thing is from dealing with a lot of Pisces is the fact that I know that they're very I would say, I hate to say demanding, but very impatient. They have that impatient, attitude of everything. The women in Betty Kids, do they still have that same demeanor, being very impatient?
It depends. I mean, when you meet a woman online, right? she's waiting on your trip to come see her. So I mean, and then necessarily they have options there too, so they don't necessarily have to wait. And like I said, they kind of are more self sufficient than other cities. So, and I would say in more poor cities, a chick won't have a problem waiting for you because you know what I mean. I mean, the most you the bag, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But in
exactly. Yeah.
Baranquilla, it's like they don't need your money like that. You know what I mean? So I would say, they are a little bit more impatient, but not as much as probably Medellin.
Okay. Yeah, I know, because like with them, they got that whole culture, the Instagram culture as well. And it's like, if you try to tell them that you're gonna do something with them, oh, they get so impatient, like, okay, I'm ready, ready. Or even just something simple as being in line, waiting for something. It's like they just more so impatient than
Oh
anything.
yeah. Oh, women in Barranquilla, like if you meet them on a dating site, since it's I would say it's online dating is the most common in Barranquilla. Your photo or profile might be shared with a friend or two and be like, hey, have you know this guy? He
Really?
messaged me, and so I've got caught up like, oh, you tried to talk to my friend on the site. I'm like, yeah. So be aware of that.
Okay, good, good. So they got that small community minded that they will talk to each other about everything just to see what's going on. So that's pretty classic. you
Oh
know.
yeah.
So as far as I know, we know that Medellin has that flake culture. How much have you experienced the flake culture being out in Medellin?
Oh, I mean, so many times. I mean, I've gave my number and never hear back. I've been supposed to meet up with somebody and like it's like really disrespectful. It's one thing to cancel and somebody write you and say, hey, something came up, but they won't even say nothing.
Yeah, yeah,
And then a few days later they might be like, hola, and you be like, what
yeah.
happened? And then they'll say, oh, something came. I'm like, well, you could have told me.
You're busy with the family, or something happened with the kids, and oh, excuse.
Like you could talk to somebody the day before you about to arrive, and then the day of y'all supposed to meet up, like they just disappear. You like, come on, man, come on. It's bad, but I understand it though. I
Yeah.
understand what you need to do.
Funny thing is, when I was out there dating, I was kind of happy at times when chicks would flake on me because I had like three lined up that I was talking to, and I was like, damn, one's trying to pick me up at the airport, one trying to meet me at the Airbnb, and I'm like, I'm trying to, work this out. So as soon as he be like, I'm sorry, I got something going on, I'm like, that's perfect, that's one off the list. I could try to work on the other two, at the time before, I could meet them and get the, spend that time with that one girl I wanted to be with. So sometimes it worked out in my advantage.
At least she told you. I mean, that was nice.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard some, bad stories, just like you said, days later, that's when they'll hit you back, and that's why it's important for brothers to know that, especially in Medellin, to definitely spend a lot of time out there if you're looking for something, because you want to make sure that you have enough time to get to know the woman, as well as get on her time, because she's on Latin American time. so
Mm-hmm.
so everything is just, it goes as the wind blows. That's when they go. And of course, when they start saying that they're organizing, getting ready, that's another hour and a half right there, 2 hours.
Man. I had a girl string me along all night. She was saying she about to get off work. I'm about to get dressed. Next thing I know, it's midnight. I'm like, bruh.
Yeah, that's what I could tell you. Just the times with the wife is the fact that it'll take her 2 hours to get ready, or an hour to 2 hours, because a lot of times it's dead air time that they're doing. That's what it is. They're in between talking to people, having their talking with family members and group chats and everything as they're trying to get ready. And it's like it becomes to be a whole long process of them getting ready. And it's like you could have just got this done over with within 30 minutes, but hey, that's just
Yep.
how they operate, the culture.
Yeah, man. If you're not their boyfriend, like you're not a high priority. If you're not in a relationship with a chick from Medellin, you won't be a priority.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The key is getting to be on their priority list. Once you become on their priority list, and that's when you know, things start to open up, and you don't spend a lot of time waiting, to spend time with them or to kick it with them. So yeah, that's one thing I definitely agree with. So we got a question here from Carlos. He says, "Are the Afro-Colombian women nicer than the other Colombian women?" Now, what's your perspective on that one?
I would say Afro-Colombian women are going to be aren't going to be easy, and so, but if you conquer her heart, I feel like she's going to be more loyal than non-Afro-Colombian women. Whereas the non-Afro-Colombian women, I feel like they're going to be more approachable, more easily
Yeah.
to kind of
Easier
talk,
accessible.
engage with, but then you're gonna have probably more trust issues with non-Afro-Colombian women. So it's just pretty much if you want to, it's if you want a relationship, I would say that an Afro-Colombian would probably give you less problems. But if you just want to date and have fun, then you may have a better experience with non-Afro-Colombian women.
So which one do you prefer? Do you prefer dealing with Afro-Colombians over just the regular Colombian women?
I mean, I prefer, and I'm a little bit more attracted to Afro-Colombian women. So, and that's my current situation. Now, I think all the women I've dated except one, the first one I dated, she was more on the indigenous side. But yeah, most of my girlfriends were Afro-Colombian.
Hold on. So the first one you dealt with was indigenous. We're gonna have to touch on that subject there. So tell us more about the indigenous the female that was in Colombia.
Oh man, I mean, she was beautiful, man. Like long hair all the way down to her butt. Um, her family was real nice. She had like a very, strong tan skin tone. I mean, things was cool, but she was, she could have been a one, but she had a friend that was married to a guy in Brazil. She was very, Americanized,
Mm.
mentally. We got a
Oh,
lot
okay.
of arguments, and she said one thing that made me say no. That made me say, "You too Americanized." She said we could have a baby, and if we're not together, I'll be the mama and the father. I said, "Oh, you sound
Oh,
Matrix chick right here." I said,
yeah.
"No way, no way," you know. But
Oh God.
it was
Where was she from? For which
Cartagena.
city? Cartagena.
Cartagena.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, man. That's tough, man. Someone to even say something like that. I'm like, if I have a child with you, we going all the way. That's my seed. So, you're not gonna be just taking my child away from me or thinking that I'm not gonna come, see my child. It ain't gonna happen. Just like now, I got my kids here with me. Sorry if you guys hear noises in the background. That's dumb here, waiting for me to get off this live. So that's why I don't do too many lives because I got too much craziness going on here. so, oh, we got another thing here. Okay, so Ray, he said he's out there. He's gonna be out in Cali in Cartagena next week, which is
Okay.
actually really good. Yeah, I just out in Cali. What was it, January? Like 1st of January, I was out there when they had they strict curfew. So had a good time out there in Cali. I wish that they were open. Fortunately, I missed everything that I really wanted to see, such as partying and even at the Christ statue. So that was something I really wanted to see, but fortunately, it was closed. And I know that's a subject we wanted to touch on next time we meet up. Hopefully next week, if you're free, touch on Cali because I know that people got a lot to say. I want to know more about Cali as far as the women and everything that's going on out there. But just my short time, I like Cali. I mess with it. I'll be back to Cali. When things are open up, and I look forward to partaking in a couple things. So let's see here. So as far as Afro-Colombians, because I know that you said you actually deal with most of them. So, are there any difference compared with the Afro-Colombians in Medellin than the women from the coast, or
Man,
especially in Barakia?
and that's tough, man. I would say this: the finest women, the finest Afro-Colombian women I've met in Colombia have been in Medellin. You know, I don't know what it is, but Medellin got fine women in all shades.
Oh
And
yeah,
I wish I could post up some pictures, man, right now, but whew,
we know, we already know. Most of
no,
us know.
the only thing is, you know, it's fewer of them than the rest of Paisas and Medellin. But I mean, they're so beautiful. But then on the coast, they're so beautiful as well. I mean, because the coast, the coast in Medellin, you're gonna get pure, you're gonna get black women.
Mhm.
But they're, they're cute in the face, shape, they're fine, you know,
Yep.
and some of them do have that Paisa blood. They may just have more Afro blood in them, but
Yep.
they have it. On the coast, you get more of the tan shades. You get more of the Dominican Republic type skin shades. So
Oh, okay.
brothers that like Dominican women, you know, the coast specifically, Cartagena will have more of the skin tones as Dominican Republic, but I won't pick because they find on the black women are fine on the coast and black women are fine in
Yeah, yeah, and that's one thing I noticed. Like I said earlier, that the women in Medellin, from what I noticed, they remind me of the women in Cuba. If you guys ever been to Cuba, they have that same look because you have that shaded, that caramel complexion, the high, high yellowish, caramel complected. So they got every shade you could think of the women, and I like it. I like how they look out there. And one thing I also want to touch on is the Afro Colombians in Medellin. It seems like to me, I noticed that they're like have their own community. They have their own little section off. It's hard to find them out in the main areas or where everybody go to, especially tourist area. You're not going to find too many at all. But you'll see a couple downtown. But have you had a chance to go into a lot of those communities where a lot of the Afro Colombians are at?
Oh yeah, I've been to two clubs where they most frequent. So in Lorales, um, Jenny Lau, and Jenny Lau hasn't really been back to what it was, but Jenny Lau was a place where they hung out at, and then there was another place called California, which is now something else. I went there in December, and where California was, and I was with my girl, and there was so many fine black women there. It was crazy, man. I was like, oh, I gotta come back by
Yeah,
myself. And I don't
alone.
know if you was down there at the time, but I had wanted you to come check it out, man, because it's right in Lorales, man. Um,
Yeah, I remember that. I remember you were talking about that club to go to, and then I think I had a lot of things going on when I was out there. I couldn't make it out there with you. Definitely, hopefully, next time we go back, I want to go out there and check out that club. If it's still open out there in Medellin to see, what's
it's
going
still
on.
it.
It
So,
is.
fellas, if you out in Medellin, I mean, I have to look at my phone to get the name of the club, but if you look up you could Google like Club California Medellin, it's the same address. And I think I went there on a Sunday night, and it was popping. So, but yeah, the Lorales area, that's basically where I see them hang out at, and like you said, downtown, you'll see a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I remember my first trip ever to Medellin. Actually, I went with my boy Jared, and he. The funny thing is, for him to go down to Medellin his first time, he actually met someone at the airport, a guy named John. He's actually a lawyer. He's an Afro-Colombian. So he would go down to Colombia and he would spend time at his house and everything, just relax and everything. He was a really good guy, and he actually showed us during my first trip out there, some of the Afro-Colombians and where they at, some of the restaurants and everything, and it's really nice. Funny thing is about a lot of the Afro-Colombians, when you look at them, they look just like us in the United States.
Oh yeah,
This this one time I was out in the street and I forgot where we were at. We were just waiting for something. I saw this one Afro-Colombian guy, and he looked like someone I knew from out here in Chicago. So I actually stepped up to him. I was like, hey, what's up? Where you from? I'm thinking he's from the United States and stuff. You're like, no, I'm from here. I was like, okay, my fault. But we all got the same, look alike from each other. Of course, what they always say, is about where we got dropped off. We all were on the same boat, but just, got dropped off at a different location.
Right.
That's all it is.
I will say Afro-Colombians, the ones I met in Medellin, they don't look at like me and you. They don't look at things as black and white, like you're a black person, that's a white person. They look at us as being American,
Yep.
And so,
Culture first.
They date, they date Colombians dark, they date Colombians light. What I mean? Like they don't look at it as we black. They don't look Colombians look at each other as Colombians, not Afro-Colombian or white Colombia, things like that. So
and that's one thing I love about the culture of Colombia is the fact that that's how it is. It's about the culture itself, and we're not gonna think about how it is in the United States that first comes race, quote unquote race, and then your money and all that stuff. I like the fact that it's just about your class out there in Colombia. It just so happens, unfortunately, that a lot of the Afro people, most of them are in poverty, but it's still about we're not looking at you, or each person is not about the color dynamics. It's about you as a person, and I love that about Colombia, and even outside the United States. Most places, although being a dark-skinned person, a black guy, sometimes it actually helps out depending on where you go to, or you can just blend in different countries. But I could definitely say for me being a shorter black guy, and plus as I look young, I don't get a lot of threats or any issues because they think that I'm younger and that a lot of people don't mess with me. So that's one benefit. But but just to touch on more about the women, I know that you said that you had a lot of flake issues in Medellin, but have you had a chance to date anyone in Medellin or had any relationships?
No, I never had a girlfriend in Medellin, and I put equal effort and time into, every city I visited. So, the fact that I didn't turn up with nothing in Medellin for me says a lot. I had one young lady that that was cool, and every time I saw her we had a good time. We were close, but we never got into a relationship because I couldn't trust her. She and she was similar to a lot of patterns I see, lying about where they at, inconsistent with communication, expect you to always write them, but then when you don't write them, it's a problem. But when they don't write you, it's like, well, oh well, they have a very arrogant attitude. I had a chick pretty much come at me like in Medellin, like, well, if you got these issues with me, why you still want to talk to me? So it's like, all right. So then I just stopped talking to her.
Bye.
But it's just like, my Americanness, didn't change who she was, so to speak. So.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing I know. But you know what? For me, I look at it as this. I believe that they got most of the way. I'm gonna say the women that actually had a child at a young age, they still have a child mentality, and that's the problem. That I noticed with a lot of women in Medellin. They still run around, like I said, with the Instagram fad and trying to always look good, trying to show wow. If you notice from some of the, I don't know if you guys have a lot of Colombianas as far as friends on WhatsApp, you'll see from their statuses is always about partying, even of course, the other ones that be doing drugs and all the other stuff. So it's just, it's all about which ones you're looking for, what type of crowd of women you want to kick it with. And of course, there's a lot of good ones that's out there as well, the workers and those worker ones, you got to try to, you got to try to find those women. You know, those are the ones you want to find in Medellin. You know, and a lot of times you may have to talk to them while they're at work to try to get to know them, because a lot of the ones on the website that I've noticed are not the good ones for Medellin. That is, I'm sure other cities different, like you said, Barakia. You got to go through websites, but in Medellin, you're gonna have to spend more time out there to try to find the right one. And as well as I've stated before, that you gotta talk to other people, get to know people that's living there, and they will actually show you the good women, the good girls, because you don't want to fall into the get a prepago, and she's not out for your best interest. She's out there for the money, for the time, and all that stuff. Or even, let's say, for example, if she wants to settle down, that's nice, but the fact is, she's going to be in your pockets no matter what. So you want a good girl that's not going to be in your pockets, because she want to show out. Yep. She's part of the old fat Instagram look. So, that's one thing I could definitely would say. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We were saying that the place, California Discotheque. Yeah. Right next to, it's like one block. I say one block south of Sweet Georgia Cafe. That's and I didn't get a chance to go there with Rob. I want to go there. I plan to go there next time we're there. And well, the question is, where are you at right now? Are you in Colombia, or did you made it back to the States? I know you were down there for some time. I may have lost. Can you hear me, Rob?
Me?
Yeah. You. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I thought you responded to the guy in the group. Yeah. Last time I was there, I visited Sweet Georgia Cafe. I actually have two locations. One in Parque Jerez, I think, or El Poblado as well. But yeah, like I said before, California is not California no more, but the address is still the same.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And where are you at now? Did you make it back to the States, or are you in Colombia?
No, I'll be in Colombia April 8th or 9th. So yeah, I'll be out there for like 3 weeks, and then I'll be in Cartagena mostly, and then I'm gonna fly out of Medellin, so I might just hang out for a day in Medellin.
Nice. I think that you were out there for like what, 4 months or so, 3 months. Your last trip?
I was out there. It was about 2 months. I was there pretty much most of December and January, and and I think mostly in Medellin, and then I think I chilled in Bucaramanga for like a week just to check it out.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about that as well. Bucaramanga, your visit out there. That's a whole nother stream that we'll have as well. that's another city I need to go to, because I've actually went to all major cities. Now I'm working on the smaller cities, such as that. That's one place I want to go to. But for me, been to Bogota, Medellin, Cartagena, Barakia, San Andreas, Santa Marta, all the bigger places. And now it's time to start focusing on those smaller cities and just get my own feel of the type of environment, the culture of the people that's there. It's up to you if you want to touch a little bit on it. Give us a little sneak peek of how you felt about being in Bucaramanga.
Bucaramanga I was interested in because they say that they have the highest GDP in Colombia. So a city with a strong economy. So I wanted to see, what it looked like. I would say it didn't necessarily meet my expectations. One, due to the weather. The weather was, it's a humid city. It's similar to Medellin, but it's very humid, even at night. So even at night, I experienced humidity in like 80 or 90 degree weather, but I never experienced humidity in like 70-degree weather. So when people was explaining to me that's tropical. I didn't know tropical, for jungle. I didn't know jungles were cooler but wet, and that's what Bucaramanga is, in the jungle. So I didn't really like the climate. It's not touristy. There's places where there's a lot of restaurants. There's a college there, so there's a lot of college people there. Some people like it. Some people like it like that, but I like tourist cities. So I just really, wasn't too excited about it. But I would encourage people to visit because some people do love it.
Nice, nice. So I know that you got a couple of trips coming along. Like you say, you're gonna be going back to Colombia. You're also going to South Africa or so. You're going to Africa. Tell us about your future. Some of the plans that you have lined up.
All right, so yeah, next month I'm going to South Africa and Ethiopia on one trip. So I'm very excited about that. Waiting for Thailand to open back up, and then I want to do some more exploring in Brazil. So that's kind of what I'm looking at in the next 12 months.
And I know that you spent a lot of time in Brazil. I think you've been to like several cities out there. But yeah, that's a whole nother show in itself too that we'll touch on. I mean, I've been to Brazil one time, had a good time. That was it. I want to go back really soon to Brazil. I have a whole story about that of going out there. Great experience. but yeah, I'm actually gonna leave no excuse his link here in the chat. So you guys, go look up the brother, go check him out, subscribe to him, check out his videos, like his videos, because like I said, this guy, he has wealth of knowledge. He has been around for several years traveling, such as myself, and good brother overall. He has a lot of financial understanding of these different countries, especially in Colombia. We talked before about the fact that I think that he's having a house built in Colombia. He actually owns some land. So he has a wealth of knowledge of of building a life out there. So definitely check him out. Good brother, real good guy. Here's the link. Put it here in the chat. I'm gonna highlight it here, so you guys could go ahead and check him out. Real good guy. Like I said, is there anything else you want to leave the people with before we leave?
Oh man, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna see you guys again, man. But in relation to Medellin and Barranquilla, I would say definitely check them out. In Baranquilla, the area you want to hit up is right by Mall. It's called Mall Plaza. So outside Mall Plaza, there's like a ton of restaurants. I'll go there at night. Even Mall Plaza has a plethora of restaurants inside the mall. They have like club, sports bar. I was there for Super Bowl, and I seen so many women. And I was with my lady, and she was just like, "You like her?" And I'm just like, "No, I don't." So Baranquilla is nice, and meeting women online is very you can meet women online. So I would check it out, and obviously Medellin for guys that like to really really turn up. You know what Medellin has to offer, man. They're both great cities, but in regards to dating, the edge goes to Baranquilla.
Nice. I'd like to get your perspective on that whole thing. And again, thanks again for come joining me on this. Hopefully you'll be available next week. We could do this again. My goal is to go live once a week, every Saturday at 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you guys want to check out more of this type of content, come join us and we'll be here. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, and we're out of here.
All right, peace.
Peace.